Many retirees are looking for a place where they can connect with others who share their language and culture, and Spain already has a well-established British expat community. And then there's the social aspect. A built-in support system can be really valuable, especially when you're adjusting to a new life in a new country. And of course, the climate's a major draw. Who wouldn't want to swap the grey skies for sunshine? Some specific Andalusian towns that are particularly popular with British retirees, and I don't mean just the usual coastal suspects. I mean places like Malaga and Marbella. These towns offer a combination of stunning scenery, a relaxed lifestyle and a more affordable cost of living compared to some of the bigger and more well-known coastal areas such as where I am now in Playa Blanca. Okay, so far Spain is sounding pretty idyllic: sunshine, beaches, slower pace of life, affordable living. But we can't ignore the Brexit elephant in the room any longer. We're actually in 2025 and things have definitely changed for UK citizens who want to live in Spain. And Brexit has definitely added some complexity. So let's break it down. What are the key changes that UK retirees need to be aware of now? Well, the most significant is that UK citizens are no longer EU citizens. This means they need visas for long-term stays in Spain. So no more just packing your bags and moving freely. There's a 90-day rule. Essentially, without a visa, UK citizens can only stay in Spain for a maximum of 90 days within any 180-day period. So, popping over for a long holiday is still possible, but if you're dreaming of spending your retirement years in Spain, 90 days just won't cut it really. So what are the options for those who want to make Spain their permanent home? Well, for retirees specifically, there's the non-lucrative visa. This visa is designed for people who can support themselves financially without working in Spain. It allows you to live in Spain, but you can't hold a job here. So, no Spanish paychecks to go with those Spanish siestas. And that could be a deal breaker for some. It's a major consideration, but for those who might want to work remotely, perhaps for companies outside of Spain, there's the digital Nomad visa, which we'll discuss a bit later. Okay, so there are options depending on your circumstances, but let's focus on this non-lucrative visa for now. What are the financial requirements? What kind of hoops you need to jump through to qualify? Well, you need to prove that you have sufficient financial resources to support yourself without relying on Spanish benefits. And they don't just take your word for it. The Spanish authorities want to actually see some evidence. So what exactly are we talking about in terms of evidence? They want to see things like 6 months worth of bank statements, proof of pension income, and of course there are some very specific income requirements. For a single applicant, you need to prove an annual income of at least €30,244, and that's roughly €2,646 per month. So enough for a comfortable life, but not exactly living like royalty. Now, what if your spouse or dependents want to come with you? Does that change your financial requirements? So for each dependent you add to the application, you need to show an additional €7,560,000 per year. So the costs can then add up quickly. You need to have your financial ducks in a row before even thinking about applying for a visa. Well, let's have a look at the options for a digital Nomad visa. Well, what about employment history? Do you need to show any proof for that? Well, of course you do. You need to demonstrate that you've had at least 3 months of work history with a contract that's valid for at least another year. So you just can't waltz in straight out of university or from a brand new startup position. Though if you are a graduate, you can actually provide proof of your graduation. And for those working for a foreign company, that company needs to have been operating for at least a year. So there are some checks in place. Okay, so we've talked about the financial side of things, but I'm sure everyone wants to know about healthcare. Spain is known for having great public healthcare systems. So how does this particularly work for UK retirees? There's a couple of options. If you receive a UK state pension and meet certain requirements, you may be eligible for Spain's public healthcare system through the S1 form. So if you qualify for S1, you can access the Spanish healthcare system just like any other Spanish citizen. That's not the only option, no. What about private health insurance? Well, it's definitely an option, and in fact, even those who are eligible for the public system often choose to get private insurance as well. A few good reasons for this. It comes down to the potential wait times, and while the public system is excellent overall, there can sometimes be longer waits for certain procedures or treatments. And private insurance can give you much quicker access. It's also mandatory in some situations, so if you're not eligible for the S1 form, then private health insurance is actually mandatory. You won't be able to get a visa without it. And also, if you're on the digital Nomad visa and using the Beckham's Law regime, which we'll talk about later, it's also mandatory. If you're not using the public system, you absolutely need to factor private health costs into your budget. Okay, we've tackled the visa and the healthcare hurdles. Now let's talk about taxes. It's complicated enough in your own country, but when you retire into another country, it gets even more complex. So I'll break it down. So the key things that UK retirees need to know about navigating the tax system. Well, first and foremost, you need to understand tax residency. If you spend 183 days or more in Spain in a calendar year, you're considered a tax resident of Spain. It means you're liable for Spanish taxes on your worldwide income, not just your income from Spain. So even your UK pension could be taxed in Spain. However, there is some good news. Spain and UK have a double taxation treaty. This means that you won't be taxed twice on the same income. So you won't pay tax on your UK pension in both the UK and Spain. But even with this treaty, there's still a lot of nuances and details to sort out. For instance, the UK pensions are taxed differently depending on the type of pension. If you're receiving a UK state pension, that's still taxed in the UK, even if you're living in Spain. Private pensions are generally taxed in Spain once you become a resident. So your state pension stays in the UK system and your private pension falls under the Spanish system. What about other types of income? Let's say you have a rental income from a property back in the UK. Well, where's that taxed? Well, rental income from a UK property is still taxed in the UK. But here's the thing, you also need to declare it on your Spanish tax return. But again, good news is that you can claim a credit for the UK tax that you've already paid on that rental income. That way you're not being double taxed. What about investment income? Things like dividends from the UK stocks. That type of income is generally taxed in Spain if you're a tax resident there. So it's really important to understand all these different income sources and how they're taxed in both countries. It can actually get quite complicated quickly, especially when you're dealing with two different tax systems. Let's talk about the actual Spanish tax rates. What kind of percentages are we looking at? Well, Spain has a progressive tax system, and that means that the more you earn, the higher percentages of tax you pay, and that's pretty standard in a lot of countries in the world. And the rates start at 19% and go all the way up to 47%, depending on your income level. Now, that's a pretty wide range. And then, just to make things even more interesting, they also have a wealth tax, something to be aware of, especially if you've got significant assets, and it applies to individuals with global assets over $700,000. So does this make Spain less attractive for high net worth individuals? Well, it's certainly something to consider. While Spain has a lot to offer, the wealth tax can be a significant factor. for those with substantial assets.
It's on the map as a resort rather than a hotel.
Is it?
Yeah, it'd be like
So it's not all just sunshine and sangria. You need to think strategically about your finances.
giant cockroach on the.
And there are ways to potentially mitigate the wealth tax through careful planning, but it's really important to get advice from a tax specialist who actually understands both the UK and the Spanish tax systems. So let's talk property. We haven't really touched on this yet, and in Spain there's the IBI, which is an annual property tax. It's actually similar to the council tax in the UK, so that's something you'll also need to budget for every year. Then also there's Plus Velia. Now this one's a little bit different. It's actually a tax on the increase in land value when you sell a property. So even if you make a profit on your Spanish property, you might have to share some of that with the local municipality. Now we mentioned the digital nomad visa earlier, and that's an alternative to the non-lucrative visa. So let's talk about that. It sounds like an intriguing option actually, especially for people who do want to maintain some flexibility and maybe continue working a bit even when they're retired. It's designed specifically for people who work remotely for companies or clients outside of Spain. So you can live in Spain and still earn income from abroad. One key requirement is that no more than 20% of your income can come from Spanish sources. So it's really geared to those who are working for foreign companies.
I've never been to this bit. I've only been to Playa Blanca twice.
What about financial requirements? Are they similar to non-lucrative visa? They're actually quite similar. You still need to prove you have sufficient income to support yourself, usually through bank statements and employment contracts. However, there's a really interesting perk with the digital nomad visa, and this is the Beckham law regime. So this is, as you've probably guessed, named after David Beckham. It's actually named after him because it was initially designed to attract high-earning individuals such as David Beckham to Spain, and it allows you to enjoy a flat 24% tax rate on your income for the first 5 years of your residency in Spain. Well, earlier I said that tax rates went up to 47%, but under the Beckham's law, you can cap your tax at 24% on income of up to €600,000. Now that's a significant difference, but not everyone with a digital nomad visa can actually take advantage of the Beckham law. Well, not automatically. You do need to meet some specific requirements and apply for it separately. But it's definitely worth a look, especially if you are a high earner. The potential savings are pretty substantial. So let's say you've chosen your visa path, whether it's non-lucrative or a digital nomad visa. What practical steps do you need to take before you can actually pack your bags and move over here to Spain? Well, the first thing and the most crucial step is applying for your chosen visa. And this is done through the Spanish consulate in your home country. And be prepared, actually, there's going to be a lot of paperwork involved. Start with your visa application. Next, sort out your healthcare arrangements. It's actually really important. You'll need to either apply for an S1 form for the public healthcare system or secure private health insurance before you arrive in Spain. So you got your visa, you got your healthcare, check. Now, what about once you've actually landed in Spain? What are the immediate things you must do? Well, first things first, you'll need to open a Spanish bank account. And that's essential for day-to-day life, paying bills, receiving income. You'll also need to register your address at the local town hall. You actually get a physical document when you arrive. It's called a Thai card, and it's actually a foreign identity card. So it's a bit like your official ID card here in Spain, and you'll need to apply for this at the police station once you're settled. let's zoom out a bit and talk about overall financial planning. What key points are vital for UK retirees moving to Spain? Well, one of the most important things to consider is the Spanish tax year. Unlike the UK, which has a tax year from April to April, Spain's tax year runs from January to December. So the timing of your move could actually have quite a big impact on your tax liability. If you strategically time the sale of your assets either before or after becoming a Spanish resident, you might be able to minimise your capital gains tax. But it's really important to get some advice from a specialist who can assess your individual circumstances and guide you on the best approach. Don't assume that what was tax efficient in the UK will automatically be tax efficient in Spain. I mean, take those individual saving accounts, the ISAs. They're really popular in the UK. I mean, everyone loves their ISA. They actually lose their tax-free status once you're no longer a resident in the UK. So that comfortable nest egg you've been building up in your ISA might not be quite so comfortable anymore in Spain. That can be a bit of a shock to some. Let's circle back to pensions. We know that pensions can be a bit of a minefield for expats. So, as we touched upon earlier, your UK occupational and state pensions are taxed in Spain once you become a resident here. But there's a really important point about withdrawals from pensions. These are actually fully taxable in Spain. So if you're planning to take a lump sum from your pension, it's definitely better to consider doing that before moving to Spain. If you've got multiple pensions from different employers, combining them into one might simplify things and potentially reduce the fees you're paying. And also consider QROPs, which are qualifying recognised overseas pension schemes. They're basically an option for transferring your UK pension overseas. The rules and the tax implications can actually be a bit tricky, especially if you transfer your pensions after becoming a Spanish tax resident. So tread carefully with these QROPs and get expert advice. There's also another crucial aspect we need to cover, and that's estate planning. Not the most cheerful topic, but definitely important, especially when you're dealing with two different legal systems. The difference between Spanish and UK inheritance laws is something that a lot of people might not even think about. But what are some of those things that the UK retirees need to be aware of? Well, one of the most significant differences is something called forced heirship in Spain. This means that certain heirs, usually your spouse and children, are automatically entitled to a specific portion of your estate. I actually talked about this in my Retire to Malta video, you may recall. So you don't necessarily have complete control over who inherits what. It's not a complete roadblock, but it's definitely something to be aware of. Now, what about UK inheritance tax? So if you're a UK citizen living in Spain, you do still have to worry about inheritance tax. If you remain UK domiciled, you're still liable for UK inheritance tax on your worldwide assets, even if you're living in Spain. Consider a change of domicile if you're really making Spain your prominent home. It's not a simple process, but it can have significant tax advantages. Have a look at the European Immigration Advisory Services. They offer some really good information on all sorts of things from residency and healthcare to taxes and other practical aspects of moving to Spain. I'd also recommend checking out the UK government's website and specifically the sections dedicated to living in Spain. These provide some updates on the post-Brexit rules and regulations, and they've got links to lots of other useful resources. The Spanish government website is pretty good as well. I should mention the prolonged absences from Spain. It's something that a lot of people might not even think about. Just because you've got residency in Spain doesn't mean you can come and go as you please without any consequences. Generally, you need to spend at least 183 days per year in Spain to maintain your tax residency status. But it goes beyond just taxes. Extended periods of time outside Spain can also affect your eligibility for things like permanent residency or citizenship actually down the line. So if you're thinking of splitting your time between Spain and another country, you really need to think carefully about the implications. We need to explore one more thing, which is Spanish property. What are the legal and financial ins and outs of buying and owning property in Spain? What do UK retirees particularly need to know about? Property is such an important part of the retirement equation for many people. And one of the first things you need to understand is that Spain operates on a civil law system, and that's actually quite different from the common law system you have in the UK. This means that contracts are interpreted very strictly and there's less reliance on judicial precedent. So dotting your I's and crossing your T's is particularly important in Spain. Having everything clearly outlined in writing is essential. And I can't emphasise enough the importance of having a Spanish lawyer review any contracts related to property transactions. So finding a trustworthy lawyer should be right at the top of your to-do list for anyone considering buying a property in Spain. Now, the typical steps involved in a property purchase. The journey usually starts with finding that dream property, and many people work with estate agents, but you can also search directly through sellers or the online platforms. It's common to make a verbal offer, but keep in mind it's not legally binding at this stage. Once your offer's been accepted, you'll typically sign a reservation contract and pay a reservation fee. So that takes the property off the market and actually gives you some time to do due diligence and finalise the purchase. Your lawyer will do a thorough check of the ownership titles, making sure everything's legit. They'll also check for any outstanding debts or mortgages on the property, and they'll verify that all planning permissions and building regs are in order. So it's basically a safety net to protect you from any potential legal or financial issues down the road. So let's say everything checks out during the due diligence process. What's the next step? So if there's no red flags, you'll move on to signing the private purchase contract. This is a legally binding agreement that outlines all the terms of the sale. The contract will specify the purchase price, of course, as well as the payment schedule and the completion date. Typically, around 10% of the purchase price is paid as a deposit when you sign the private purchase contract. The remaining balance is paid on completion, which is when the property is officially transferred into your name. And that takes place at a notary's office. Now, the notary plays a pretty important role in a Spanish property transaction. There's transfer tax, which is applied to resale properties, and the rate depends on the region that you're in, but it's usually between about 6 and 10% of the purchase price. There's also stamp duty, which is usually around 1.5%, plus you'll have to pay the legal fees, notary fees, and the land registry fees.
It's quite a nice one, isn't it?
Yeah, Tasha.
Tell me if it fits.
It fits. That's all right. It's nice. Yeah.
I'll get that. I purchased.
So all in all, it's wise to budget for around 10 to 15% of the purchase price to cover all these additional things. Now, we've focused on buying so far, but renting is also pretty popular, especially for those who are looking for some flexibility or aren't quite ready to commit to buying. Now, renting gives you a chance to try before you buy, get a feel for an area. Like, what's the rental market like in Spain? Well, it's quite diverse. You've got everything from short-term holiday lets to long-term. And just as with buying, it's crucial to have a written contract. And the contract should lay out all the terms of the agreement, the length of the rental period, the rent amount, and the payment schedule, the responsibilities of both the landlord and the tenants. So let's talk about ongoing responsibilities of actually owning a property in Spain. What kind of costs and duties does that come with? Well, just like in the UK, there are ongoing costs associated with properties. We've already mentioned the IBI, the annual property tax, and then you'll have utilities, electricity, water, gas. Community fees are also quite common in Spain, especially if you live in an apartment complex or an urbanisation. And these fees cover the maintenance of the communal areas, gardens, pools, security. So these need to be factored into the budget as well. Property ownership in Spain comes with a responsibility to actually maintain your property in good condition, both structurally and aesthetically. You'll need to get planning permission from the local authorities before undertaking any major work, so it's always best to check with a lawyer and make sure that you're following the procedures correctly. Hopefully by now you're feeling a bit more informed and empowered to make any decisions about an exciting new chapter to move to Spain. Retiring to Spain can actually be incredibly rewarding experience. It's a chance to immerse yourself in a new culture, enjoy a more relaxed lifestyle, and hopefully soak up plenty of that famous Spanish sunshine. So until next time, happy planning.
Sunset dreams by the ocean blue. Final chapter, but the start feels new. A volcano whispers secrets to me. Life in slow motion, like it should be. Palm trees sway with each gentle breeze. Time unwinds and the mind finds peace. Sand between toes where I take my stand. Paradise found in this golden land. Dance through the twilight, fade into stars. No more rat race, leave behind the cars. Sip on memories that life's poured out. Retiro and Lanzarote, no doubt. No more rush, no deadlines to keep. Wake with the sunrise, let feelings seep. Laughter echoes on these quiet shores. Every day opens new doors. Forget the past, dive into the day. Here I plan to forever stay. Seesaw kisses my aging skin. In Lanzarote, life begins again. Dance through the twilight, fade into stars. No more rat race, leave behind the cars. Sip on memories that life's poured out. Retiro and Lanzarote, no doubt.
Excuse me, have you got any ice creams that look like penises?
Yeah, they got rid of them. To be fair, there weren't many people eating them.